Hey everyone, welcome to Founders 365 with me, Stephen Haggerty. Today I am joined by Dan Rozycki, co-founder and CEO of the TransTech group. How are you today, Dan?
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Stephen. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you so much for being here, Dan. And before I hint, well, I suppose people have already read the description of terms of what this podcast is about today. But before I tell it, I just want to say I'm really looking forward to speaking to you on this subject, because actually this is super refreshing for me. We get a lot of tech founders, tech-based businesses on here, so this is a refreshing podcast. Not saying any disadvantages to any of the previous guests, but you know what I mean. So Dan, further ado, what does TransTech Group do?
Sure, thank you. TransTech Group is a pavement engineering company. So that means we design highways and design runways and seaports and racetracks and proving grounds for car manufacturers and tire manufacturers. And we work for like Formula One and that kind of stuff. So any kind of pavement. So we have 4 lines of business. We do pavement research, which is for government agencies. We'll develop new pavement design methods or new materials. We'll do pavement engineering, which is kind of doing the design for big toll road projects or highway projects or runway projects. We do pavement testing, which is we have some fancy equipment that we can take out to a highway and tell you how many more years are left before you have to rebuild it. And then the last thing we do is through the research that we did, we actually developed a little widget that we sell that is a thermometer for concrete. And it'll tell you, it'll speed up, it'll tell you when the concrete is ready. So it's almost like if you've ever used like a turkey popper on when you're cooking a turkey, and that little stick pops out when the turkey is fully cooked. Our little widget for $35 tells you the minute your concrete is fully cooked and reached the minimum strength that you need, so you can speed up construction.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's really cool, and that's what TransTech does.
I mean, I've got to ask, how did you get into founding this business? Because, like I said to you before we went live, no 6-year-old sits there and goes, I really want to solve the pavement problem that we have in the 21st century.
Sure. Yes. All right. So my background in really concise terms. Both my parents were not born in the States as I was. So, both immigrants, both workaholics. I've got 2 older brothers, and I just wanted to be like them. And they always had summer jobs. So I became kind of a workaholic. Lemonade stand when I was 8, car wash when I was 10, the usual stuff. Yes. Started a dog walking business when I was 12. And then my mom finally got me a real job when I was only 13. And from that, I just had this run of really crappy bosses, like 13, 14, all my teens. And it bothered me because my immigrant dad, born in Warsaw, grew up in World War II. So, his experiences of living through a war, really, he ended up just being concerned about, he wanted people to get along, and he wanted people to get along really badly, right? Because after everything that he saw in war, that was the most important value to him. Yeah. That's what he taught us, that like the most important thing is people need to be able to get along. And that created in me this really strong desire that I want people to get along. And then by contrast, I had this run of really lousy, terrible bosses. And so it just combination made me realize that I want to be able to show the world that lousy bosses are doing it wrong. And that the way to have business growth and profit is by treating people well and not trying to squeeze the most that you can out of them. And that's how I got into this.
I mean, that is an incredible value your dad gave to you in terms of your outlook into the world.
Sure. Yeah.
Because
So then specifically TransTech. So what happened was while I was going to university studying civil engineering, I just got a part-time job working at a civil engineering company that turned out to be this pavement engineering specialty that I actually thought was really interesting. And so I was their first employee, and I worked there for 7 years. And then my boss, who was actually a decent boss, decided that he was bored in this industry because it wasn't making him rich enough, fast enough. So he sold the company to my coworker at the time, Rob, and me. And then the two of us added the word group to the company name, bought his assets. Like we didn't take over the business. We started our own business, bought some of his assets, and then we started TransTech Group. And I would say as much as people talk about, challenging partnerships when you start a small business, it was extremely helpful. It helps that Rob is freaking amazing, but it also helps that he and I got to work together for 7 years before becoming partners.
Yeah. How did that conversation go with Rob though? When you just sat there going, should we do this? Should we take this on? Should we take this beast on?
The conversation was really brief. I said, I'm like 27. Why the hell not? And he said, yeah, because he was about the same age. And he said, yeah, you're right. And I said, so who should be president? Who should be vice president? And he said, well, I'm a better engineer than you. So you should be the president and in charge of all the administrative and financial, and I'll do the engineering. And I said, all right, that's great. And that's how the business started.
This almost sounds like a napkin contract.
Yes. With about as much brains and organization. Yes. That's correct.
Yeah. Love it. I absolutely love it. And how have you guys developed over the years then? Because, those four key streamlines, income streamlines, God, I can't speak today, income streamlines that you have must have been developed over time. Obviously, you're 7 years of experience, but for you now, you took the helm. Did you start going, actually, these are some more exciting things we should be looking at for the future?
So it's a great question. It started out just as pavement research. So 100% of our revenue came from pavement research in the very beginning. And my business partner, Rob, was very interested in staying focused on pavements and not interested in branching out into all sorts of other things. And that really, and my initial employees were also very passionate about pavement research. And that created a limitation on myself that, when you think about like, what are the big mistakes that you've made in your career as a business owner, as a founder, I think one of the bigger mistakes was it took me a long time before I realized that we could branch out and we could grow this company faster than I thought we should. So we started out just doing pavement research. And after several years of doing it, a client approached us and said, you guys are so creative and you're such pavement nerds that if you would just apply that to like the actual design of a highway, I think you could apply your creativity and come up with really brilliant new ways to design highways. And we said, yeah, you're right. We should totally do that. And so we agreed to work for them on this one project, and we ended up shaving the construction cost. We reduced construction cost by about 10%.
Wow.
Which saved the government a bunch of money and it saved the taxpayer a bunch of money, and it saved our client a bunch of money because they split the savings 50-50, and we were in a whole new line of business, and it worked out great. And so that's how we got into pavement design. And then from that, we started doing all these multi-billion-dollar toll road projects around the world. And then from that, we discovered that these car manufacturers and tire manufacturers and Formula One, a lot of people really needed this very creative, deep specialty and deep understanding of pavements. And that's kind of how that grew into design. And then people needed test equipment, so that grew into testing. And then, as I mentioned, that concrete widget that we sell, the concrete thermometer, came out of a research project that we'd originally done.
And the widget, is that like your B2C product?
It's still B2B, but you're right. I mean, it's, everything, so 3 of our 4 lines of business, research, design, testing, that's all basically selling services and billing hours on a timesheet. But you're right. I mean, the most scalable thing would be this widget that right now we sell almost $2 million worth of the product. They're about $35 each. So we're about 40,000 units a year. But it's got the potential to grow to $10-20 million in a few years if we play our cards right.
Definitely. You need to get like an e-commerce guru behind that and just get it out the door.
That is correct.
That get those numbers up, man.
That's right.
So one thing I'm curious that you mentioned there in terms of like the vehicle manufacturers and that side of things, how does that relationship work with them? Are they approaching you going, look, this is what we're doing with our cars in the future in the next 5-10 years, if it's that long, and this is kind of like what we need our highways and roads to be at to manage this?
Sort of. It came both ways. It was partly our reaching out to them, meeting them at industry events, and then it's kind of a small, tight community, so they started hearing about us, and then it became a lot of inbound calls. But the short of it is, every car manufacturer, every tire manufacturer, even outside of driverless vehicles, so just traditional vehicles, they all have those big proving ground facilities where they, test vehicles for vehicle dynamics and for miles per gallon and fuel efficiency and traction and all that. So all that pavement has to be built to a very high exacting ISO standard that that's much higher than the standards that you need for a regular highway. And so we just over time discovered that there's a real need there, that they didn't have anybody on staff who had the kind of expertise and the depth of knowledge that we have. And so we're able to help them design proving grounds and test tracks that will last longer and cost less to build.
Amazing. I'm really curious to know if you know about this product that I'm about to speak about, because a couple of years ago, I don't know why this came into my head just now, but there was this there's this crowdfunding product that effectively was trying to recreate pavements and highways, and it was a honeycomb effect LED basis that had signals in, all that kind of stuff, all the arrows and all the
LED lights and all that.
Yeah. Do you remember? Do you know that?
Yeah. Was it a hexagon or an octagon?
Yeah. And it was like this,
like tiles for the pavement, right?
Exactly.
And it looks like a big honeycomb.
This elderly couple that basically lived on a farm, and they were fed up of their farm roads just getting destroyed by their tractors, I think, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So they came up with this. With people nowadays being able to invent things a lot easier, how does that affect you? Because I would class you as being quite high up in that food chain, right? You're doing the big deals. You're building you're working directly with the people that are implementing the decisions. When you see those innovative products, probably at, I'm guessing, the shows that you go to and things like that, what gets you excited about that future? What gets you excited about, actually, I can see this being implemented at some stage in the next couple of years?
So let's see. So that's a really broad question, but the things that get us really excited today is, in the world of driverless vehicles, there's a really big shift that's happening that we have kind of been quietly hoping for. And that shift is Google, Tesla, Uber, Lyft, Waymo, Volvo, all of these companies have been sinking GM Cruise, Ford Arlo, they've all been sinking billions of dollars into the driverless downtown taxi. And what they are learning is that may not be achievable in the next few years. And what we're seeing is a lot of those investors have left that segment. And a lot of those companies are actually starting to fold because you can get about they like to sum it up as they figured out about 95% of the safety technology that they need to actually make the robotaxi work. But that last 5% is just brutal. It is just too many inputs, and it is just too hard to simulate a human. And what they're finding is there's a whole other sector that is a much simpler problem to solve, that has a much easier revenue model, and that is truck freight on a highway. Mm-hmm. So a driverless 18-wheeler on a highway. And they are starting to shift towards that, and that we are super excited about. Because they're going to need some pavement engineers to help them design that pavement of the future, because you could have an electric 18-wheeler now that gets recharged as it drives down the highway. So you have a revenue model now for the driverless technology, for the AI, for the cloud platforms, and for the what they call dynamic electric vehicle charging, DEVC. That is available now. And so that is something, and what's really exciting about it is we're pretty much like 100% there already. Because on a controlled access highway, you don't have the challenges that you have with pedestrians, dogs, downtown, trash cans, traffic lights, none of that. It is a much simpler problem to solve. And so the technology is really pretty much ready today. We can start implementing and selling that concept immediately. And that's really exciting.
So if it's ready on your side, what's the gap now for it to become commercialized?
I don't know if there is much of a gap. It's really just, I mean, there's a company called Too Simple, TU Simple, that is successfully testing those things. That they have driverless trucks, and they are driving on highways in the States right now. I'm almost positive that in Europe, there's an organization, the acronym is F like Frank, EHRL, FEHRL, and they are very much like the European Industry Association for driverless autonomous research. And they are doing a lot of driverless truck testing on highways right now. And then there's organizations, Wattway and Colas and other organizations that are already installed electrified roads. So it's very much something that there may not be much of a gap left. It might just be as we watch all that stuff roll out in the near future.
Yeah. Amazing. Out of curiosity,
yeah,
what would you say is the most innovative country when it comes to, you know, pavements, highways? Is it the States? Are you guys ahead of us over here in Europe?
No. Europe is way ahead of us.
Really?
I don't know if there's like one nation. I would say it's a big mixed bag, but there are a lot of things that Europe is doing. But the real difference is that most nations in Europe are just more willing to invest more taxpayer dollars into pavement infrastructure than we do here in the States. That's kind of the big difference. And so when you're willing to spend more per kilometer, then you can produce a pavement that will perform better and last longer. And in the States, we're generally just not willing to spend that much.
That's really interesting, because from a consumer's point of view, and someone that obviously has no real information about what's happening with the highways and roads here in the UK, it does seem that the US is a little bit further, especially when we start talking about, you know, the future of autonomy and that kind of side of things.
Maybe in some ways, but again, it's a pretty mixed bag. There's a lot of advancement happening in Europe, actually, and I was trying to think of like specific countries that you would say are sort of a leader. In India, they have been recycling plastic soda bottles into asphalt for over a decade now, and that's a pretty forward-thinking idea. A lot of people have been grinding up tires for a long time and recycling those into. And then there's a few people who are recycling just trash and grinding it up and shoving it into an asphalt pavement, which is good and bad. But recycling plastic bottles into asphalt pavement, India has been doing longer than anybody else. Wow. And they've actually found it makes asphalt less expensive and it makes it perform a lot better. So that's a pretty exciting thing that is now spreading around the world.
Amazing. So with that example, then I'm really, because I never even knew that, one, they were doing that, but also when you start hearing about things that are happening, obviously they've been doing that for 10 years. Do you immediately go, one, why are we not doing that? Because I'm sure you have the US obviously have the resources to do that.
Sure.
And number two, it's like, where can that go? Like, if India are doing that, you know, basically recycling bottles to put into asphalt, like you said, what's the next step up from that? How can we do that better?
Yeah, I mean, it's a brilliant question, and you're absolutely right. So, I mean, you're right. I mean, the problem is governments just move slowly, right? So, some brash professor finally convinced somebody at the Department of Transportation or the Ministry of Transportation in India to actually take a chance on it and do some test sections, and it worked. I do know that finally, after a dozen or so years of watching it in India, there are a couple of transportation agencies in the US that are testing out that idea right now in cooperation with some universities. Here in Texas, we're actually, there's a university in Texas that is testing that out now with the Texas Transportation Department. So, it is starting to happen, but, governments are, and they're very nervous about safety, for reasonable reasons. So that's why that stuff kind of drags sometimes.
So now I'm going to ask a really ballsy question that I'm sure you're going to hate. But if you didn't have any red tape, if you didn't have those meetings after meetings after meetings about decisions, what is the first thing that you would change in your world that you would be able to do?
Do you mean in terms of transportation or in terms of as a business owner?
Oh, as a business owner.
God, as a business owner, I would be a lot more direct and demanding, and trust my intuition, and trust my gut.
Mm-hmm. And what would that enable you to do?
That would enable me to grow this organization faster and in a way that makes my employees happier.
Brilliant.
And our passion. So there's two. Can I have one more minute?
Yeah, you can have as long as you want.
Okay. So there's two sort of fundamental passions that we have in our organization that I try my best to ensure that all my coworkers and my employees share it as well. One is we are very interested in being very creative in the world of pavement engineering for the purpose of reducing the cost to taxpayers. Like we think there's just a lot of ways that highways and runways and pavement structure could be a lot less expensive for the traveling public. And really, who doesn't need pavement? Like pretty much everybody, even if you don't own a vehicle, you still depend on deliveries and all that. So everybody needs pavement. So that's passion number one. Passion number two is going back to all the crappy managers that I had, and then having this opportunity to show them that they're all wrong and that you actually need to treat employees well. What I learned from that experience is sort of our second passion. What I learned from that experience is that long-term, and so this is the kind of thing that somebody could write down, long-term job satisfaction requires three things. A job has to be fun, fulfilling, and financially rewarding. And that is kind of a core statement that TransTech is built around. That what I learned from all my previous jobs is that at least one of those three things was always wrong. That the job might be fun, but you wake up one day and realize, what am I doing with my life? Because it's not meaningful. Or the job is meaningful, but the people you work with are terrible and you don't have enjoyable days. So fun means on a superficial level, it has to be a good job. Fulfilling means on a substantive, deep, meaningful level, you have to do important work. You have to do something that moves you. And then of course, financially rewarding, you have to be properly paid and compensated. And so TransTech was really built starting on that fundamental, that a job needs to be fun, fulfilling, and financially rewarding. And so the two passions that I try really hard to build our organization around is those two things: saving taxpayer dollars, so that's sort of our outward looking passion, and then internally with my coworkers is finding, making sure that they have a long-term job that is fun, fulfilling, and financially rewarding.
So as a leader, as their boss, how do you keep in check that? How do you check that then?
In a lot of ways. I think people like to call it management by walking around. So our version of that is, we're a small organization. There's only 33 of us. So it's pretty easy for me to just check in with everybody. And so I try my best to talk to everybody. I'm not perfect at it, but I try my best to talk to everybody. That's one. Two, we have really well-defined company values. There's 5 of them. And then we do a 360 coworker feedback every 6 months, where I ask everybody to evaluate everybody that you work with directly on how are they doing on those 5 company values. And that is usually a really good way to check in with everybody and make sure that that their experience is the experience I'm hoping for.
Love that. It's funny how the world works, though, isn't it? The fact that your father instilled these amazing values in you. You started working for people that didn't reflect those values, which obviously made you not enjoy your job and other factors, of course. And now right. you're hiring 33 people, and you are now installing those values on them. And it would be so lovely if a couple of those employees end up starting their own thing, and those values have been adopted, let's say, into more and more companies. So it's really refreshing when I speak to founders who are so set on installing values, and especially values that are personal to that founder, because I think it can almost get into a checkboxing exercise, can't it? Oh, a company has to have values. Let's put them on the wall, and that's what we work towards. But
Sure.
it's so clear for you, or from where I'm standing with you, that it's not just that. It is this almost, I'm guessing, like a way of life now in terms of when you do it.
Yeah, I mean, and that's so, I am sort of classically Generation X in that I'm kind of a cynic and I'm sort of skeptical about things. And so, I was not planning to be a business owner necessarily, although now looking back, I see all these entrepreneurial things that I did when I had all these different summer jobs. But I was not intending to be a business owner. But when my boss got bored and asked if my business partner and I wanted to buy the company from him, and we saw this opportunity, I started reading all these business books and kind of what you're talking about, reading all these other vision statements and mission statements and value statements that business books recommend. And, I got into these groups of small business owners and, and so many, it's such a hot topic of like, what is the secret to success and what should your vision be and your mission be? And so much of that felt applied and not natural. So much of that felt that people they knew they wanted to be a business owner and they knew they had to find some compelling vision or values, but it just seemed like they weren't looking inside themselves to really figure out what is truly important to them. Like the business should absolutely be a reflection of the owner's actual values and the owner's actual personality. And because that's so much more sincere, it's so much more authentic, it's so much more believable to the employees for them to get, to have buy-in and to really believe in what you're trying to do. It is so key. And so, can I add two quick things?
Do it.
Okay. I think the secret to success, because this is like, so many other business owners are always trying to figure out what the secret to success is.
The secret sauce.
Yeah, right. And I think it's two things. It's hack and trite, to quote Elon Musk, and I apologize, but he's the most recent person I heard say this, that like he works 100 hours a week.
Sure.
And that's really kind of it. Like, you don't have to be brilliant. You don't have to have a brilliant idea. You don't have to have any kind of magic. I think it really comes down to, I personally believe secret to success requires two things. You just have to put in more hours. I mean, you're going to have to. There was a guy, really short story. I went to an industry association event. There's a page. He was very highly respected here in Texas, and he's bragging about all his achievements at the state level and all these wonderful things that he's done. And that was his speech. For 20 minutes, he just talked his resume. And everybody was very impressed with all of his achievements. And his first question from the audience was a guy in the front row who said, his name is Bill. He said, Bill, I'm so impressed with all of your achievements. How do you handle the work-life balance? And Bill took a long pause and then said, well, my children are in their mid-20s and they still hate me. And he said, and I'm not exaggerating. He said, and I am working today to try to create a relationship with them for the first time. And he said, so there's no secret to it. He said, you can't do it all. And you have to decide what things you're going to focus on. Mm-hmm. And so if you really want to have an incredibly successful business, you can, but there's no chance that you're not going to sacrifice other things. So when Elon Musk says you got to work 100 hours a week, yeah, and that means you're going to have to not be able to do certain other things. So secret to success, I think, is two things. One is that you just have to be willing to put in more hours. Number two, the head trash. I think if you really, I see limitations and mistakes that all my fellow business owners make, and 99% of the time, it is because of some sort of mental block, mental hang-up, head trash, fear that they have, pride issue that they've got. And so I think great business owners could probably stand to use a certain amount of psychological therapy to investigate them first and clear out whatever blocks and head trash they have. Because I think, as I look back over my career, all the things that I could have done better really came out of if I had not had sort of that hang up or that mental block, I probably could have been, much more successful.
Dan, listen, I normally ask for 3 things at the end, but you've just absolutely smashed that out of the bag. So I don't even need to do that. You're doing my job for me, so thank you for that.
Sure.
Listen, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I know we haven't gone too deep into it, but I think you're clearly a business owner, a founder that really cares about their industry, really cares about your employees, and really cares about what you're trying to achieve. And to be honest, that's what I firmly believe is how you make a good business. So it's not rocket science, as Elon Musk would say. You know, he's not trying to do brain surgery. He's only trying to make a colony on Mars. And let's make it more simple in life. So, Dan, I really want to thank you for being on Founders 365. Like I said, thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. If anyone wants to reach out to you, find out more about you, how can they do that?
The website is thetranstechgroup.com. My email is dan@thetranstechgroup.com. I'm happy to talk to anybody.
Perfect. Dan, like I said, thank you so much for coming on. And thanks everyone else for listening and watching. This has been Founders 365.